I can't thank you enough for your love and concern for our family. It believes everyone has the amazing power to touch with goodness and compassion. King Charles made a shocking discovery around Easter that shook Buckingham Palace. Join us as we discover Maid Elena's incredible story and the royal household's defining event. Some claim Buckingham Palace is full of mysteries. Things happen behind dazzling gates and huge walls that the world never sees. Most people think it's all lavish dinners, gold rooms, and important visitors drinking costly wine. There's lots of that. The servants who clean, cook, serve, and operate the palace while remaining invisible make up another world inside. Elena, a maid, was one. Elena distinguished herself among royal maids. Elena rarely spoke, palace sources said. She didn't chatter in the staff kitchen or appear unneeded. Most maids had nicknames, but Elena was always the quiet one who kept to herself. She kept quiet, did her work, and moved like a shadow. Her presence was barely noted. Something completely changed that. The story began Wednesday afternoon. On that day, various foreign guests visited the palace. Diplomats from around the world attended a royal roundtable with King Charles. They only knew it meant more labor and stress. Luckily, Elena was assigned to clean one of the guest parlors where visitors would wait to meet King Charles. The room was clean, flowers neatly arranged, and tea served perfectly on the table. The other maids left. Elena heard noises down the hall while dusting corner shelves. A group of men in black suits and traditional costumes from several nations entered. Most didn't speak English. Elena understood their rapid, biting statements but didn't respond. The guests spoke a foreign language to King Charles' personnel, but no one understood them. Their speech indicated a palace interpreter was needed, but there was an issue. No royal translator was found. No one knew his whereabouts. The other staff silently frightened because a Chinese diplomat was asking for something and no one understood him. An Egyptian man spoke terrible English, while a Frenchman tried to help, making things worse. Palace workers aren't trained for this. No one expects them to jump into a room full of diplomats and resolve an international dispute. They can carry trays and clean windows. Thus, anxious laughter and awkward stares flooded the room. An unexpected event occurred. Elena interpreted what the Chinese ambassador meant while holding and decorating the teacup. After she interpreted, the room froze and the Chinese diplomat looked at her in wonder. He replied swiftly, asking about the schedule and whether he had to take off his shoes before entering a room. Elena answered fluently, detailing palace customs. "You surprised? That was just the start. Wait to see what occurs." Out of curiosity, a French ambassador asked her in French. Elena replied instantly, like she'd always spoken French. Even the guards outside the room were peering in to see what was happening. Staff froze in disbelief. The other maids watched the door with mouths open. The talk switched languages quickly and kept up with every word as it was normal. King Charles passed by. On his way to greet guests, two advisors followed. He heard the voices, a mix of languages from the corridor. That was typical. He stopped mid-step when he heard something in the palace, which hosted many guests. Latin was spoken, fluent, casual Latin, not ecclesiastical Latin. They weren't diplomats. She was a maid when King Charles looked at the doorway. Using a gentle voice, he asked the advisor who was the maid with his visitors. As mentioned, Elena was the silent maid. The advisor Deco didn't recognize her among the maids. Elena glanced at the king and felt she was in trouble. Her stomach sank. This was hardly maid-friendly attention. She was expected to be silent, only speak when asked, and avoid diplomatic exchange. King Charles entered the guest room with an inscrutable face. The gathering fell silent. Every attendee bowed slightly to nod respectfully. Elena kept her head down, her heart racing. He approached Elena, then something unexpected happened. King Charles asked the maid if she understood Greek in a calm, clear voice. Elena replied calmly in fluent Greek. A long, startled quiet followed their brief exchange. His Majesty lifted an eyebrow. He nodded approval with his hands behind his back. Without explanation, he turned to a staff member and ordered, "Have her sent to my study now." Diplomats muttered. Palace staff turned wide-eyed. Nobody could recollect a similar event. Elena stood still, unsure of her legs. Then came staff leader Mrs. Winthrop, a strict, sharp-eyed woman who commanded the maids. She immediately took command. Elena was brought through the mansion in minutes. She had never entered past rooms, simply cleaned them. The king's study was rarely visited by servants. She was going to cross that line for reasons she didn't comprehend. What awaited her on the other side, she knew. Buckingham Palace life was changed forever. This was just the start. After meeting with the ambassadors, King Charles walked to his private study, which looked like a history book. Royal sources said it epitomized old custom. He found the maid waiting, his shoulders tense under his superbly made suit. King Charles stood by the window with his hands folded behind his back. Elena entered without a glance from him. His mind was still processing what he saw. How could a maid speak Mandarin, Arabic, French and Russian naturally? Everything seemed impossible. It happened immediately in front of him. Elena's nervousness when King Charles looked at her spoke it all. She didn't know if she'd be applauded or fired. Could the king fire her for getting engaged in royal subjects she had no business in? King Charles calmly told her to seat in the high-backed chair across from his desk. Elena obeyed without hesitation, sitting upright with a calm face and alert gaze. This was familiar to her. No one was invited to this room for a chat. You can tell Elena was stressed. Both were silent for a while. Charles examined her like a puzzle piece that didn't fit on his well-organized board. After a few minutes, the king requested her name without evasion. Smart tricks. He authoritatively spoke to her without warmth. Elena inhaled and spoke after the king's query. Elena Morcos, daughter of linguist Professor Elias Morcos, present herself. A royal insider stated King Charles's expression flashed when she spoke her father's name. It was obvious he knew this name. Elena said her father spoke several languages and nations with a shaky voice. He worked with international governments, universities, and researchers. Her family spoke one language in the morning and another at night. Her only life was this. King Charles said nothing after the introduction. His piercing, unfathomable gaze were on her. He breathed deeply, his face contracting. He approached his desk, placed a hand on the chair back, but did not sit. He then asked where her father was in a whisper. Elena's response was shocking and terrible, and her statement surprised everyone. Keep watching. Future events will surprise you. Elena revealed everything, horrors that defined her existence, years of being passed from hand to hand like nothing. She described being kidnapped, trafficked, and trafficked between borders like a ghost. North Africa, Middle East, Europe's nooks. She survived everywhere by mastering the language, customs, and unbreakable norms. Each word and gesture she mimicked helped her survive. For the first time, King Charles seemed older than in polished portraits and public speeches when firelight flickered across his face. He clenched his jaw and didn't say anything, but his silence spoke louder. Elena persisted. She told him how she got to this nation, how faked papers gave her a new name, and how she could hide as a royal cleaner. In this setting, no maid was noticed. Royal homes lived by the unspoken norm. She said she hadn't planned to stay. She considered the palace a stopover and another hiding location before continuing. But the stillness, rigorous rituals, and everything staying where it belonged spoke to a part of her she didn't know was alive. Days made sense here in a world that had taken everything. The room went quiet after she finished. Her narrative weighed heavily. Nobody moved. No one spoke. King Charles then did something that surprised the study. His smile was narrow and sour. It was bitter, like a man who learns he's ignored a fact for too long. People like him rarely notice quiet movements. Maids, drivers, and anonymous faces behind curtains. Maybe they should. She wasn't comforted. This place wasn't like that. His voice was low and measured. Inside these confines, stories weren't important. even when the story was spectacular. What mattered was how she had entered his palace and realm without anyone noticing. Either this woman standing before him was a virtuoso at disappearing in plain sight, or his staff had failed him in ways that would soon be addressed. Their topic turned to languages. Charles demanded proof. He wanted to hear. Elena remained calm. She gently corrected him. Not 9 languages. She started before anyone could catch their breath. She named them individually. Each word she spoke was native sounding: Mandarin, Arabic, Greek, Russian, French, Italian, Persian, German, Portuguese, Spanish, and some Turkish. This room seemed to hold its breath. Charles remained silent. Something about the room's air changed, but not his face. That subtle gut alteration before anyone talks. It was unspoken but present. Respect hesitant. Immediately King Charles decided, fast, sure, no more floor and room cleaning. He would instantly reassign her under his direct supervision. Tomorrow the position would exist. Advisor on language. He'd name it that, and daring questioners might ask it. Soon later, King Charles brought Elena and the royal advisor back in to explain the plan. He instructed the advisor to complete the papers and make arrangements in the morning. Elena, her voice shaking with delight, thanked the king, but his next words silenced everyone. In a calm, steady voice, Charles looked at her and said, "This isn't kindness, it's a necessity. This palace has one interpreter, and he's nowhere to be found." The room went silent again. No one argued. No one dared. Elena left the study, the heavy doors closing behind her. But that wasn't the end of it. Remember, Prince William is already working to streamline the royal family. So when King Charles eventually passes on, what will Elena's place be? And will the other officials at Buckingham Palace accept the king's decision? We'll get to that in the next chapter, so don't go anywhere. Now here's where it gets wild. The news of King Charles appointing a maid as his personal linguistic advisor spread through the palace faster than wildfire. It didn't happen in front of cameras, no grand event, no formal announcement to the world. It came quietly, slipped into the day's official notices with a short, sharp letter to palace staff and senior advisors. One line, that's all it took. Effective immediately, Elena is appointed as His Majesty's personal linguistic advisor. No explanation, no ceremony, but that single line hit the palace like a thunderclap. The reaction started with the old guards. They couldn't openly protest. Not with Charles still sitting on the throne, but according to one palace worker, most of the people in the palace were not happy about the appointment. The message was loud and clear. This was an insult, a disgrace. Never in Buckingham Palace's long, rigid history had a servant been raised to such a post. Tradition had been slapped in the face, and the old guard wasn't having it. But it didn't stop with them. The murmuring spilled over to the senior advisors. The real power behind the throne. These were men and women who'd spent their entire careers clawing their way up the royal ladder. People who'd studied at Oxford, spoken at international conferences, and advised generations of royals on matters of protocol and diplomacy. And now, overnight, they were being outranked by a maid. To them, Elena's appointment wasn't just some odd passing decision. It was a direct challenge to everything they built their lives around. During one heated panel meeting with the king, one of the senior advisors finally snapped. In a tight, formal voice, he called the king's decision reckless, said it set a dangerous precedent, that it could unravel centuries of carefully maintained tradition. The room went tense, all eyes on Charles. And true to his nature, the king didn't raise his voice, or get drawn into a debate. He listened, nodded once, and calmly replied with a single word, "Noted." That was it. No long speeches, no back and forth. Decision final, and that quiet dismissal, that unshakable authority made even angrier. Downstairs in the palace kitchens and staff quarters, the gossip was relentless. Elena had once scrubbed those very floors, peeled those same potatoes, and carried silver trays through the same hallways. Now she was walking beside the king. Her old colleagues couldn't decide whether to be proud, jealous, or just plain shocked. Behind closed doors, some were convinced she must have done something to win the king's favor. Rumors spread like wildfire. Amid all the noise, a few quietly admired her. The junior staff, the immigrants, the overlooked workers, tucked away in the palace's forgotten corners, saw Elena as a kind of symbol. If she could rise, maybe one day someone like them could too. But even they didn't dare show it. In a place like Buckingham Palace, going against tradition was dangerous business. According to reports, Elena felt the shift right away. People she'd shared laughs and meals with now avoided her. Conversations would stop cold the moment she stepped into a room. Orders came with stiff, cold formality. For the formal maid, things were never the same again. She wasn't Elena anymore, she was Miss Elena. The king's favor meant no one openly challenged her. But the looks, the quiet, and the isolation said everything. If you think the opposition to her appointment was over, well, what you are about to witness will surprise you. A few days after her appointment, during a small diplomatic briefing, a senior advisor made a sharp jab at Elena. Charles looked up from his papers. "Some decisions are made precisely because they cannot wait," he replied. The room fell silent. Behind the scenes, high-ranking officials began murmuring about the king's judgment. Was he losing it? Was Elena's condition a reflection of inadequate leadership? A few even sent quiet messages to Clarence House from where Prince William was observing the situation carefully. In William's vision, the royal family should be smaller, leaner, and more modern. He had submitted a proposal for cutting out unnecessary roles and bring the institution more nearer to the people. And now, with his father promoting a maid to a position of influence, those plans faced a new question. Some insiders believed William wouldn't hesitate to quietly remove her. Others argued that he might see value in her, especially if she could prove herself useful in future diplomatic meetings. After all, having someone who could switch between Mandarin, Arabic, French, Russian, and ancient Greek wasn't something you found every day. But for now, no one knew for sure. As for Charles, he didn't back down. In private meetings, he continued to consult Elena, asking for her input during delicate conversations with foreign delegates. He valued her perspective, her understanding of nuance, and the fact that she had lived a life most people in that palace couldn't imagine. To him, that made her invaluable. And while the backlash inside Buckingham Palace was fierce, outside the palace gates, the public was beginning to take notice. Some hailed the move as a bold step forward. Others called it reckless. Newspapers ran headlines like "King's Maid turned advisor," "Modern Monarchy," or "Royal Mess." Radio shows debated whether tradition had a place in today's world. The pressure is building, and yet, amid all the gossip, the glares, and the doubts, Elena stands firm. She didn't seek out attention, nor did she cower from the cold start. She walked the palace halls with quiet dignity, knowing every step she took was watched by those hoping to see her fail and those quietly rooting for her to endure. In the end, Charles addressed the palace in his usual understated way. No grand speech in the ballroom, no public declarations, just a brief private message to his staff. Tradition isn't about standing still. It's about carrying forward what matters and leaving behind what doesn't. Loyalty, wisdom, and courage can be found in the unlikeliest of places. And in this palace, those who earn trust will keep it. The message is clear. Elena is here to stay, at least for now. Thank you for staying with us. Do you think Prince William will eventually fire Elena as part of his royal reform? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.